everyone. So this is Coming to a Shared Understanding, or How I Love to Stop Assuming and Learn to Stop Assuming and Love Communication, because I couldn't resist getting a Dr. Strangelove joke in there. Actually, the next speaker also has a Dr. Strangelove joke in their title, so I'm really pleased with that. So I'm not going to tell you anything about myself to start. So the first thing I'm going to ask you to guess is how old I am. I'm going to do age ranges based on what you can see of me, okay? If you can see me at the back. I would stand up on the table, but it would probably collapse, so we're not going to try that. So just based on me, what you can hear, what you can see, we're going to show us hands. So who thinks I'm 18 to 24? Okay, a few of you, okay. Who thinks I'm 24 to 29? Most of you, okay. 30 to 34? Okay. 35 to 39? No, good. 40 to 49? One, oh. Well, older than 50? Okay, no, again, the same person. Right, so this time I'm going to give you some more information about me, and I want you to tell me if you think I'm older, younger, or the same. So with some extra information, I used to be a police officer. When I was at university, I was a police officer for several years. I'm a head of software engineering, so I run a team. That's head of software engineering, not really a lot more I can say about that. I also volunteer for St John Cymru. I'm a trainer with them, and I run a division, and I'm in charge of the cycle response unit in Cardiff. So I do quite a lot of things. So does that change how all people think I am? Does anyone think, based on that I'm younger than you originally thought? Okay. Anyone think I'm about the same as you originally thought? A few? Quite a few of you? Anyone think I'm older than you originally thought? Okay, it's about 50-50 on the same and older. So I am actually 30. So thank you, people who thought I was younger. It's really nice. I still got ID'd, it's great. So we're going to be talking about shared understanding. But before we do that, this is how we like to think communication happens. So I think of an idea, in this case, a lovely cat. I tell you about the cat. Communication happens. You know, one way, you think about the cat. That isn't what usually happens. That's not how communication happens between people. So how it actually happens, or how I think it actually happens, I think of a cat, I tell you about the cat, you think of a different cat. Because I've just told you it's a cat. So I say, why, or the other person then tests their understanding of that. They say, is this the cat you're talking about? No, cat isn't orange. Okay, very slow slide, sorry. They're grey, it's a grey cat. So, okay, fine, my understanding has changed. I now think it's a different cat. So I test that again. I say, is it this cat? And the person trying to communicate says, no, it's not a screaming cat, it's a nice cat. And that imagery actually matches that cat really well. I'm really pleased with that. So then eventually comes the idea, yes, actually we're now thinking about the same cat. And is this the cat? Yes, that's the same cat. And that is a shared understanding. These two people who are talking about a very majestic, long-haired cat, I couldn't tell you what breed it is, are now thinking of the same cat, hopefully. So you might see a problem with this, in that this is not the model of talk I'm giving. I'm doing the first one, where I'm telling you something and expecting you to all understand it. So we're going to hopefully get to a shared understanding of what shared understanding is, because it's very meta, and I like meta. Shared understanding is a phrase that comes up in Agile a lot, but I have never seen a definition for it, so I've made one up. Where two or more people have a common perception of a situation and how ideas and actions would affect it. And that's a common idea of how ideas and actions would affect it. It's a refinement process. It's something we test. It's something you talk to another person about, and they tell you, no, that's not what I was thinking. I was thinking this. And you're refining that idea between you until you have similar or a common idea between you. We do it every day. Every conversation we have, should we go for lunch? Yes, let's go for lunch. One of you's thinking McDonald's, one of you's thinking a nice Italian in town. And then you test the idea between you, and you come to a shared understanding between you about where you're going for lunch, what time you're meeting, what you might be having, who else is joining you. But that doesn't happen by one person just saying, yeah, we're going for lunch, and you immediately all think of the same place at the same time with the same people. And it's relevant in all areas of life. It's not just a professional thing. It's not just something that we do at work. We do it in our personal relationships, we do it in our work life, we do it everywhere. Has anyone ever had that situation where they're talking to a friend and their friend says something, or another person, and you get really hurt by that? And that's not what your friend meant, but your understanding of what they meant is something hurtful. You've jumped to a conclusion, you've made an assumption based on what they've said. And sometimes we go back to that person and say, did you really mean to say that about me? Is that how it came across? And they may say yes, in which case, great, thanks. Or they may say, no, I actually meant this other meaning, and now you have a better understanding between you of what was being talked about. So it's relevant to everything we do. So who else uses it? We don't just do it in software. In fact, we're commonly not great at it in software. But other industries do it as well, and they're also not great at it. Military is a very common. Who's seen Top Gun? Seen in the briefing room. They're all sat there watching a briefing, and the idea is that they are getting a shared understanding of what the battlefield is like, what they're going to be doing at the battlefield, where they are, and then they go and play volleyball because, Top Gun. Emergency services use it. There is JESIP, the Joint Emergency Services something, I can't remember it off the top of my head, which talks all about shared understanding, where you have the police, the fire service, the Coast Guard, the ambulance service, all working together at a major incident. And the idea being is they have to have a shared understanding of the situation and a shared understanding of the risk in the situation so they can properly deploy their resources. So there's a lot of work there, and they actually call it the shared understanding of risk. So they have started adopting the term shared understanding, which is great. Medical practitioners, if you ever go and see your doctor and your doctor asks you what's wrong and you try and tell them, they will have an idea of what that diagnosis might be. It may not be what the problem is. So you refine back and forth until you have that understanding between you, hopefully. I'm sure many people have different experiences with their GP, of what the problem is. Pilots, Alex spoke in his keynote yesterday about how pilots have checklists in aviation. That's a common shared understanding across the entire industry. If my engine falls off, what do I do? Here's a checklist, it tells me. That's my shared understanding with the aviation industry of how to fix a broken airplane, hopefully. Sales teams. Sales and tech often have an adversarial relationship, but at the end of the day, they're trying to sell a product or a service or one of a million things, and having a clear understanding of what the customer's problem is and what they have to solve that problem is very important. There's no point in them trying to sell something to a customer who doesn't need it. Well, that's what sales is, really, isn't it? So that shared understanding between the salesperson and the customer is very important, because otherwise they're going to try and sell a product that the customer doesn't want. And so understanding the problem is part of that. Yes. Who recognises this quote? Oh, okay. So for some of you, it is from the Star Trek Next Generation episode, Darmok. It's spoken by both Dathon and Captain Jean-Luc Picard. And this is a shared understanding and a culture. This is a culture, sorry, spoilers for those who haven't seen an episode from about 20 years ago. This is a culture that just talks entirely in memes, basically. Darmok and Jalad at Tanagra was talking about how these two fighters, I can't remember actually, I'm going to get it wrong now, so if I'm wrong, please don't correct me. Correct me afterwards. Talking about how these two fighters fought together at Tanagra. And so it's about togetherness and working together. And so for people in that culture who understand the meaning of that, great. They know what they mean when they say that, because they are discussing everything in memes. I'm sure we don't do that ever anywhere else. So that is a shared understanding, a cultural shared understanding, which is really great because it's not real, but promise. But we all have these assumptions. So we're really good at taking shortcuts in conversations. Memes are a great example of how we take shortcuts. I show you a meme. Those of you who recognise the meme will have that whole context of that meme, and we will hopefully have a general sense of what that means together. And we don't have to fill in all that context between us. So we take those shortcuts, and we take assumptions when we're talking to people about how they might have been brought up. So everyone has the same experience as me, right? Everyone's had the same education, same culture, everyone thinks like me, everyone knows what I'm talking about. Because we assume that. Because we are not particularly great at putting ourselves in other people's shoes. We're very good at being ourselves, strange enough, so we do it every day, but we're not great at being other people. That sounded a bit weirder than I meant it to. So we make this up. So how many of you, if I say, think of a yearly calendar, think of the kind of January, February, March in a 12-pack with a 1 to 30 days? That's a really bad description of it. Yeah, okay, terrible description. Kind of rectangular thing. To me, I grew up in a house, in my room, with a calendar on the wall. It was a January to December calendar in a wheel. So that's was from about the age of probably 2 to about 9 when we moved house. So for me, whenever I think of the year, I think of it as a wheel. But if someone says to me, think of a yearly calendar, they're going to have a different idea of what a yearly calendar is to them. But they won't necessarily think, well, Sean might think differently. Sean might think of it as a wheel. And I often am very bad at thinking that other people might not think of it as a wheel. Because I'm like, yeah, so March is here, right, on the wheel. It's kind of there. Like, what are you talking about? Calendar's not a wheel. So we'll have assumptions. So this is a nice meta meme. Who recognises this meme? Who doesn't recognise this meme? Okay, so a couple of you. So I'm going to explain this meme. So this is from the movie The Matrix. You might have heard of it. This is Lawrence Fishburne playing Morpheus, who is a kind of ambiguous oracle type who is explaining to Keanu Reeves' Neo that the truth of the world is not as he sees it. And it's the line, what if I told you? And in this case, not everyone understands this meme, which fortunately I was right in saying this. If everyone had said, I know this meme, I would have been really embarrassed. But some of you didn't, so that's great. So this whole context is about how I'm showing you a truth of the world that you might not have thought about. So there you go, meta, great, I love meta. So that's something to be careful of, is that if you have a shared culture and a shared understanding, great, but if you don't, and you're working with people who have diverse upbringings, educations, cultures, etc., which is exactly what we want in life, really, then you have to think about that, because your starting points are different. So why does it cause problems? So 2 or more of your team members may have wildly different ideas about the same piece of work. So if I say, go and implement a login form, how many of you are thinking of the same thing? Don't know, because we haven't tested that idea. So you don't have to redo the work. Really good example was recently I was working, I was working, I do occasionally do it. One of my co-workers, I said, can you go away and implement this API? Great. He went away, implemented the API, came back, presented to me, and I went, well, that's not really what I was thinking. Or that's not what I meant when I wrote the spec. That was a bit embarrassing. Fortunately, it was like 1 or 2 parameters needed changing, but it's not, he wasn't wrong, I wasn't wrong, we just had a different understanding of what it was he was creating. And it causes friction, because it's really disheartening to have to go, well, that's not what you wanted, I'm going to have to go and rebuild it. And it wastes time, and time is quite valuable, I've been told. But yeah, it can cause a lot of friction in teams. It slows your work down, because you're redoing work. In minor cases, you're changing 1 or 2 variable names. In major cases, you're completely re-implementing 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 5 weeks worth of work. I had a massive wobbly recently at work because a large piece of work I did, all specced out, completely discussed, came back, no, that's not what we wanted. Okay, what did you want? Well, we wanted this. That's not what you said. Well, you didn't read it properly. Great, thanks. And it reduces your bus number. Who knows the term bus number? Who doesn't know the term bus number? So, for me, that's a common term, and not everyone knows it. So we don't have a shared understanding. So I'm going to explain bus number, which is great. Bus number is the number of people in your project who can be hit by a bus without it affecting your project. So the lower your bus number is, the bigger a problem you have. If you have a bus number of 1, then if one person gets run over, especially if it's a specific person gets run over, you're kind of dead in the water, or you have to do a lot more work because it's not been documented, it's not been spec'd, it's all in their head. How many people have gone, where's the documentation? And someone goes, it's in my head. How many of you have co-workers like that, or are like that yourself? Yeah, I'm like that. I am the bus number. I am number 1. If I get run over, it's a problem. And that's a problem, and I recognise that's a problem, and I'm trying to fix it slowly. So how do we improve our understanding? How do we improve our shared understanding? So encouraging questions in every environment. Asking and answering. If you're just asking questions and no one answering it, well, you're not going to get anywhere. But you also need to encourage that there's no such thing as a silly question. Because if people are scared to ask questions because they feel like you're going to have a go at them, oh, why are you asking that question? I documented it. Or if you documented it and they haven't gone and read the documentation and you've made it clear where the documentation is, that's one issue. But if you are assuming everything is simple knowledge and it's not, and they come and ask questions, well, it's just basic knowledge, why don't you know it? Then they're never going to ask questions, and you're going to get to the situation where they don't have the same understanding, and they're not encouraged to develop that understanding. And saying I don't know or I don't understand is absolutely fine. In fact, that's what we want. If you don't understand something, you don't know it, say it. Because the worst you can do is make it up, and then, great, well, there we go. Now we've got someone who's made up an idea that isn't what they're discussing because we haven't discussed it with us. So I don't know the answer to your question right now. It's fine. I'll go away and find out, or we'll work on it together and we'll come up with an answer. Even better. Challenge the assumptions. Challenge your own understanding. Again, come back to asking questions, but it's a feedback loop. So in medical terms, one of the things that I deal with in St John is patients who don't want to be treated. So this person has come to me with a head injury. I'm concerned that they might have an internal bleed. I'm concerned they have an internal bleed, and if they don't go and get it seen to, they might die. If they want to refuse treatment, that's okay. But to assess whether they have the capacity to do so, we ask them to restate it in their own words to show that they have the understanding of what they've been told. And in the same way, if you're told something you're not sure, restate it. Go over it. And create that feedback loop so you're working between yourselves to refine the ideas. Consider the language being used. Terms like bus number. Make sure that the words and the terms you're using are ones that everyone understands. And check. Check in with your team. Check in with your friends. Check in with the people you're working with to make sure that they do understand what you're saying and that you're not using terminology that's unfamiliar to them or it is familiar to them but in a different way than it is to you. Involve your relevant team members. So all of our meetings at work have the entire team. We have QA, we have UI, UX, developers, product management, because doing that means that everyone gets a chance to have an idea of what's going to happen before it happens, rather than us doing all the work and throwing it over to QA and going, there you go, yours now. And they've kind of gone, well, we haven't been involved in this, so how do we know how it's supposed to work? One of the things we do is the product team design the feature specification, and then the development team do the next level of detail with the product team, and so that they test their understanding. You've said you want a login form. Okay, so when you fail the login form, we're going to say it brings you back to the same page with an error. Is that what you wanted? Yes. So you go over that. You create that feedback loop again. Measure twice, cut once. Anyone heard that?
Once.
Yeah. So it's a term I've heard mostly in woodworking, where you measure the space you want to put a piece of wood into, you measure the thing you are cutting, and you measure as many times as you need to make sure you've got it right the first time, otherwise you have to get a new piece of wood and start all over again. Document everything. Not just words, pictures, links, anything relevant to the discussion. If you're having conversations, please make sure you document them. If you don't capture them and you've had a whole conversation on Slack or on Discord or on Teams or whatever product you want to use, and you haven't recorded it anywhere other than an email, and that might be what you want to do, but you need to make sure that information is accessible. Speeding up a little bit, this is running a bit longer than I thought it was going to. What tools do we need? Well, record the information. You can do a wiki, ticketing system, on a whiteboard, on post-it notes, on a pen and paper, on emails. It's not important how you record it. The fact that you record it is important, and making it accessible to your team, to everyone who needs access to it easily. Searchable is great. So yeah, be careful with post-its because you can lose them. I do that quite often. And consistency. Don't record half your stuff on a wiki, half your stuff on a ticketing system, and the other 10 things on a post-it note because, that's where you kept them. And then you lose track of that consistency and people don't know where to look for information. Meetings are a very key part of this. Who likes meetings? Okay, I feel that's good. Meetings are good. We like meetings because meetings help you come to that shared understanding. So having a clear idea of the agenda before the meeting is quite important. My boss refuses to go to meetings that don't have a set agenda. If you don't know what the meeting's for, it's not going to help you. So stating clearly in the email invite or this letter you send to people or the conversation, we are going to be doing this set of things in the meeting. We understand what we're going to do. Coming into the meeting, so we're ready for it. Ask every participant to articulate what they expect, so you understand each other's expectations. We are going to decide, I'm expecting in this meeting that we're going to decide this at the meeting. And document it, please. Increase your bus number. Make sure everyone has that understanding. So if one person gets hit by a bus, if 2 people get hit by a bus, the project can continue and it's not all locked away in someone's head. Any questions?
Thank you very much, Sean. Do we have any questions here? Okay, I'm going to start.
Oh, you got one. I got one there.
Oh, sorry.
Go for it.
So, thing I'm taking away from this is that getting a shared understanding isn't a preliminary part of the work, it's actually an important part of the work.
Absolutely. So did everyone hear the question? Because I'm having trouble hearing. Sorry, yeah. So the I guess checking understanding is that that creating a shared understanding isn't a preliminary part of the work, it's an important part of the work. And yes, it's a continuous thing. It's not just something you do at the beginning and then everyone has a shared understanding. Great, 3 months down the line, we've all got the same shared understanding that we did 3 months ago, because things change. You work on a project and suddenly you find that module you wanted to use there doesn't quite work like it did anymore. And so you need to keep that conversation, that feedback loop going to make sure that the shared understanding is kept throughout the project. It's not just a one-off. Does that answer the question?
Yes, thank you.
Do we have any more questions? Yes.
Do you have any tips for helping people to realise, so in your initial cat imagery,
Yeah.
You could have a situation where the person on the right goes away thinking entirely the wrong cat. Is there any way, have you got any hints for reminding people, helping them to remember that they need to check their understanding, realising that they might not have understood?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think asking them, and that sounds a little bit like a kind of get a wiggly answer, but asking them, when you've explained it to them, ask them, okay, so what did you take away from that? You know, tell me in your own words what you think I just said to you. And I know that sounds a bit confrontational, maybe that's not quite the phrasing I would use, but right, we've gone over this login form. I'm going to use login form as an example because there are myriad ways to do a login form. We've gone over this login form, so how do you think it will work? You know, based on the conversation we've just had or the communication I've just given you, how do you think it will work? You know, scribble it on a piece of paper, you know, and then we can check that understanding between us and test that work.
Sorry. Sorry. Oh, okay. We might have time for one more question. Okay. Oh, yeah.
Hi. Do you have any suggestions on convincing people or coming to a shared understanding that having a shared understanding is essential?
Oh, that's a really meta question. No, I like meta. I said I may have stressed the point quite extensively that I like meta. Meta's great. I think finding examples of where it's fine, especially if you're working, and I don't want to pick on anyone in particular. I'm going to pick on management because I am management, so I'm picking on myself, and that's kind of okay. But find out what's important to the people you're trying to convince. So if it's time for delivery of a project, if it's amount of employees, if it's amount of money spent on X, Y, Z, find examples of how you can improve those metrics. Yeah, metrics, great word, there we go. So, you know, we are spending a week per month on redoing work we've already done, and here's the proof of it, is how I would do it. Find the thing that they care about and how you can improve that. That's a bit mercenary, I know, but there we go. Does that answer your question?
And we have someone else that wanted to ask a question. No? No one? Okay. Thank you very much, Sean, for a very interesting talk.